Hey everybody, welcome to my kitchen. If you ever dreamed of making your very own chewy, tangy sourdough bread, this video is for you. Now of course, you do need your own sourdough starter, and if you don't have one, don't worry. There's a link in the description of this video that you can click on, and I'll show you how to make your own sourdough starter. If you do have it already, fantastic. Let's get started. I'm going to turn my scale on, make sure that it's in grams, and place my bowl on top. Zero it out. I'm going to put 25 grams of my starter, 50 grams of all-purpose unbleached, and 50 grams of my whole wheat or rye flour. Now I'm going to put 100 grams of warm water and then stir it. I'm going to put it into the jar. Lightly cover it with a cloth. And now my sourdough starter is ready to be continued for whatever bread I want to make in the future. Now to get our sourdough bread going, we want to turn this wet starter into something a little more firm. So we have our bowl on our scale, zeroed out, and we're going to put 1 cup of all-purpose unbleached flour. And we're also going to put 2/3 a cup of our starter, and that approximates to 113 grams. And then we're going to stir it together. And it's going to seem like it can't possibly take all of that flour, but just keep on stirring it, and if you have to use your hands, that's okay as well. Once we get a lot of flour into that starter, we're going to add 2 to 4 tablespoons of water. You can use your hands. So I'm just ensuring that all the dry flour is gone. Once you feel like you have a rough, shaggy ball of dough, we're going to put it into our bowl. We're going to lightly mist it with oil. Place it in. We're going to cover this with a rag, and we're going to let it ferment at room temperature for around 4 to 6 hours or until it's doubled in size. Then we're going to put it in the refrigerator overnight, and I'll see you in the morning. Welcome back. So I took the firm starter out of the refrigerator, and I let it rest for around an hour just to take the chill off. And now I'm going to cut it into 10 small pieces. Okay, gonna set that aside. I'm going to set my bowl on top of the scale, and I'm going to set it back to 0. Now I'm going to weigh approximately 574 grams of bread flour, or all-purpose unbleached is fine. I'm going to put approximately 2.5 teaspoons of salt, and then I'm going to whisk it all together. I'm going to add all of the 10 pieces of the firm starter, and then I'm going to measure out around 397 grams of water. And then I'm going to stir it all together. Now, as this gets tougher, if you have a stand mixer, you can totally use it to put it all together. If you do not have a stand mixer, you can lightly flour a countertop and knead it for around 8 to 10 minutes. And what we're going to do now is spray it with some oil. And make sure you roll it around so that the entire thing gets coated. So the technique we're going to do to build the structure in the bread is known as a stretch and fold. And it looks like this. We're going to grab one end, pull it up, and bring it over. Rotate, grab one end, bring it up, and pull it over. 2 more times, bring it over, stretch it up, and bring it over. So you're going to imagine that there are 4 points of a compass, and each side you're going to stretch it and pull it over. We're going to do a set of stretch and folds every 20 minutes for a total of 4 sets. And we're going to cover the bowl with plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out in the process. I'll see you at the end of it. Okay, so my dough has rested for about 5 hours now, and I can see here that it is very bubbly. So at this point, we're going to grab a bowl, a medium-sized bowl, and we're going to line it with a dish towel or a cotton cloth and sprinkle in some flour. Then we're going to cut the dough into 2 loaves while being careful not to deflate it too much. So let me show you what that looks like. So gently pull the dough away from the sides. And then just flip it over. Now when you pick this up, you can very simply gather the corners lift, and place it in. Again, gather the corners. So now we'll let these proof for 2 to 4 more hours before we're ready to bake. So we've waited and waited, and finally we get to do the fun part. This is how we make the bread look good. And there are 2 ways to do it. The first is with a bread stencil, and what I have in front of me is something that I've created. I sell them on Etsy. They're bread stencils that you can use flour or cocoa powder and really decorate the top of your bread. I put the link in the description in case you want to look more into the fun designs and patterns that I have on my shop. And the second way to do it is with a lamb knife. And this essentially is how you score the top of the bread, and you can really make fascinating, intricate designs with it. And I'm going to use both methods today. So the oven is ready. I preheated it at 500 degrees and put my cast iron pot within it. Now if you don't have a cast iron pot, don't worry, I will put a slide up at the end that will show you how to do the crusty bread without one. A cast iron pot is also referred to sometimes as a Dutch oven. So what we're going to do now is important. What you see in front of me is my dough that has sat out for around 4 hours. I have a baking sheet with parchment paper on it. I have a bit of cornmeal, my lamb, this is flour, my stencil, and a bottle of water. The very first thing we're going to want to do is take some corn flour. You could also use cornmeal, corn flour, semolina, or you don't have to do any of this at all. This just gives it a nice crunch on the bottom. We're going to take our baking sheet and put it on the top of the bowl, like this, and then we're just going to flip it upside down, remove the bowl, reveal the dough. In order to get the flour to stick to it with my stencil, I'm going to just briefly mist the top. You could do this with your fingers. Just put a little wetness on your fingers and rub the top of the dough. And then I'm going to apply the stencil. I'm just going to sprinkle the flour on top. Now, what I like to do is I like to press it a little bit in so it really bakes into the crust. Okay? And then how pretty that is. Now, every bread is different. Sometimes it'll look very rustic, sometimes it'll get a little messy, and that's okay. That's what adds to the charm of it, right? So to make this a little more intricate, we're going to use our lamb knife. First, I'm going to put 2 little slashes around the side. And then I'm going to cut in the center of these petals. And there we go. If you have a Dutch oven or cast iron pot, it should be ready now. So we're going to take it out and be very careful. Going to remove the lid. I'm going to show you what this looks like. So we're going to take an edge of the parchment paper and slide the dough into the cast iron pot, trying not to disrupt our lovely design. But again, if it gets a little messy, that's what adds to the charm. We're going to cover it with the lid, and we're going to put it in the oven for around 30 minutes so that it gets a nice springy rise. And this part's important. We want it to preheat the oven to 500, but once you put the bread into the oven, we're going to decrease to 450. Let that bake for 30 minutes, and then we're going to remove the lid and bake it again for 20 minutes so we get a nice golden crisp. Beautiful. A good way to know if your bread is ready is if you knock on the bottom and it has a hollow sound. So what we'll do now is put this on a wire rack and let it cool for about an hour. It's very tempting to cut into it to see what it looks like, but it may be gummy or too moist at that time. You want to let the steam evaporate as much as possible. So I'm going to let this set for about an hour, and then we'll cut into it and see what the inside looks like. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for, enjoying your sourdough bread. Let's cut into this and see what it looks like. It's beautiful, it's light and airy, there are lots of holes, and the crust is very crispy. I hope you enjoy your sourdough bread. Thanks again for watching.